Welcome to the Healthy Gut Podcast with Rebecca Coombs, the place where you can learn how to achieve a happy, healthy gut. Here's what's coming up on today's show. Welcome to episode 17 of the Healthy Gut Podcast, and today I'm joined by Kyrstie Barcak, who is the founder of afreshlegacy.com and creator of the Kitchen Garden Box. She inspires and helps families to start their own vegetable garden and experience the benefits of fresh food. She believes that anyone can grow at least one vegetable or herb at home and have a positive impact on family time and the creation of good food habits. Her first book, Grow Just One Thing, The First Step in a Fresh Food Journey, was published in March 2016. And Kyrstie was diagnosed with SIBO in July 2016 and has modified her family vegetable garden to include more SIBO-friendly vegetables that she can enjoy as part of her meals. Kyrstie and I talk all about that journey. She was already eating an incredibly healthy and varied diet. Yet when she got her SIBO diagnosis, she found it quite confronting that vegetables that she had once eaten with abundance had to be taken off the list for the moment. And that was quite challenging for her. We also talk about the lifestyle and the mindset component that she needed to address in order to regain her health, and how she did that, and also how she managed this condition when she is a busy working woman who's also a mother running a very busy household, and how she had to learn to take time for herself. Now, guys, I'd love you to stick around to the end of the podcast. I've got some really exciting stuff to share with you, so do stick around, and I hope you enjoy today's episode with Kyrstie Barcak. Welcome to the show, Kyrstie Barcak. It's lovely to have you here.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
That's my pleasure. Now, I'd love to get straight into your story. And we met each other, over a year ago now. And we did a business course together where we got the opportunity to meet. I just absolutely love your business so much. It's just such a gorgeous thing to do, helping people learn how to plant and grow their own veg. And it was actually through our connection at this business course, KPI, that we did, that you started to learn a little bit more about SIBO. So over to you to tell me or our listeners about your journey to date and your own personal experience with SIBO.
Sure. Okay. That's exactly right. I think if I hadn't have met you, I'd probably still be trying to work out what the heck was wrong with me. So I've had digestive issues for as long as I can remember. So as a baby, I was dairy intolerant, and had eczema as well as a child, quite severely. So from a young age, my mum experimented with various non-dairy milks for me, and at a stage during my childhood, I was able to reintroduce milk. But then when I started working and was in a high-pressure job, I started to get a lot of digestive issues reoccurring. And over the years, I've worked out what the triggers were to some degree and have modified my diet accordingly. But just suffered on and off with bloating, pains in the stomach, eczema reoccurring. And then this year I've also suffered from rosacea and really sore joints and some tingling in my arms, particularly. That's caused me a lot of problems. So I've had multiple tests at doctors to try to find out what different symptoms were related to, and they always came back to say there was nothing wrong with me and no issues with my health. And I clearly knew there was something radically wrong. For me, things got worse after the birth of my second son. My health kind of suffered from that point on. So I guess it reached a real critical point for me when I was doing an exhibiting my business at an event about 6 months ago, and I was next to a stand that had some kombucha and herbal remedy drinks, and I tried some of them, and I also had a lunch that was provided on the day, which was really heavily grain based, and about half an hour later, I started to go get cold sweats and severe pains in the stomach, and I almost threw up. And because I was the only person at my stand and I had customers coming by trying to talk to me, that was just really distressing to have to kind of run off in the midst of this major event and try not to be sick. So I thought, oh no, I just can't go on like this. I need to work out what the heck's wrong with me. And I'd been talking to or listening to your story, I guess, as part of the course that we were doing, and hearing bits and pieces from you. And I thought, oh, some of those things are what I've experiencing. So I started to do some reading on the SIBO website, and I did the online test, and that came up saying that it was highly likely I could have SIBO and I should see a practitioner. So I found a naturopath and went and had the SIBO breath test completed in July, and that came back as positive with a high methane dominant result. And I started off on the biphasic diet, and I did that for about 12 weeks, and I just found that incredibly difficult to be so restricted in my diet, because my whole life, my business is around food, and I'm a recipe developer, so I'm constantly cooking and creating new things, and this was, to me, was just like running into a massive brick wall, and I just found it extraordinarily stressful. And but I thought, you know what, our diet is overall really healthy. We didn't eat processed foods. Our food is predominantly based on what I'm growing in our vegetable garden. And so I thought, this is going to be quick and easy. I'll just follow the rules, do what people tell me to do, and it'll all be done and dusted really soon, because I know I'm starting from a pretty good point. So I stayed by all the rules. I didn't deviate once from the diet. I was really strict, and retested in September, and I was feeling much, much better. My symptoms had dramatically reduced, and I thought, beauty, this is fine. I'm going to come up as back to normal and life can go on. So I retested and actually came back exactly the same. So that was kind of devastating, really, to have put so much effort into being really strict and following the required diet and my treatment plan that my naturopath had set. So I've stayed on the biphasic diet for a little while, but I've now moved on to the fast-tracked diet, which I'm finding a little easier from a lifestyle perspective, because I can incorporate more food that I enjoy. So for me at the moment, things are kind of at a stable base. My symptoms are under control. I'm sticking to the diet in that I don't deviate and have anything with sugar or anything processed. I'm still avoiding grains and all those things that are recommended on both the diet plans that I've been on. So yeah, I'm kind of at a point now where the next point that's been recommended for me is antibiotics. So I'm just thinking about how and if I want to go down that path.
And that can often be a really big decision for a lot of people, because for many of us, and I speak to a lot of people, the concept of taking antibiotics after quite often significant antibiotic use in the past can be quite daunting. Quite often people have made a decision, and I myself very much fall into this category of thinking, I don't ever want to take antibiotics ever again unless my life depends on it. So to then have the concept of, oh gosh, I might have to take antibiotics for this bacterial overgrowth, but did that cause my bacterial overgrowth in the first instance because I took so many antibiotics? I can imagine you might be in that position. Is that how you feel around the concept of taking antibiotics?
A little bit. I don't particularly like to take any medication unless I really have to. So yeah, It is that, but the thing that I find most difficult with SIBO is that there are so many forums and there's so much information and there's so many people who want to give you advice, and it's well-meaning advice and they're doing it because they care about you. But I find that really difficult to take on board everybody else's information and feelings and experiences about it when it's such an individual disorder for people that what might work for somebody else isn't necessarily going to work for me. So I'm really keen to just stay on the path that my naturopath is putting me on. I guess for me, the thing with antibiotics is just wondering whether that is going to be really the be-all and end-all. Like, is that going to be the trigger that gets me clear of SIBO so I can move to the next phase of the treatment? So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just unsure. I'm not exactly sure. It's one of those. It's just been such a bumpy ride from the beginning that yeah, I'm just not convinced that is going to work after getting to this point after so many months.
Yeah, and I think it's really a great point that you raised around it needing to be completely individual to oneself, and that we can use the diets and the treatment protocols as a guide, but we really need to play our own private investigator and work out what has gone wrong in our own bodies to have caused SIBO to develop, because it doesn't just occur in a healthy body. Something must become dysfunctional in order for that bacteria to grow in excess numbers. And also understand that we need as individuals in terms of treatment to help us get through it. I know I talk about that quite a bit in episode 8 with Angela Pfeiffer around really delving deeply into one's personal history to understand what went wrong and to also get an idea of what could be done for treatment. I'd like to talk about the emotional side of being on a journey with SIBO where you haven't experienced perhaps the results you were hoping to, at the outset. Can you talk a little bit about that journey for yourself?
Sure. I guess for me, because I was just really convinced that it would be a short-term thing for me. Yeah, I kind of set myself aside to think, we eat well, and so this can't be that bad for me. I really can't have it severely as what I'm sure lots of people do because, we follow a pretty good diet. So I thought, a few tweaks here and there and pretty quickly this thing will be under control and I can move on. It's been really, it's been something that's raised a whole heap of emotion for me because my business is based around food and growing food, preparing food and developing recipes with that food. It's been a thing of great frustration and also real anger for me. It's really raised all these emotions that I wasn't expecting to come to the surface. So it's been a really rocky, bumpy ride, because it's impacted our lifestyle significantly. Just as one example, every Sunday afternoon our family has had snacks on the deck, we call it, for the last number of years. So at 4 o'clock, no matter what everybody is doing, we all come together on the deck and we have cheese and we have rice crackers, and I made dips, and we might have some smoked trout if it's a special weekend or something. But we get together and we chat about the week that's coming, and we just spend a really nice after the rest of the day and the evening relaxing together. And it's all based around this beautiful food that we have out. There might be nuts and dried fruit and whatever else we have around. So when I was diagnosed with SIBO, I couldn't eat anything on that plate, not one single thing. And for the first 2 weeks, my kids and my husband were outside as part of our regular Sunday on the deck. I couldn't even go outside. Like, I could not go and sit out there and watch them eat the beautiful snacks. And I just didn't feel like I could participate. I just found it so stressful and, just really upsetting. So that was a really hard time to have to, I guess, think about ways that I could adapt so that I could still participate in that special family time. So I did, given that recipe developing is something that I love to do. I worked with some of the ingredients that we're allowed to use as part of the diet, and I made some dips and worked out how I could still join in and eat a small amount. And I found, since I moved to the fast track diet that and can incorporate cheese easily in my diet now, that was a huge help.
But cheese is such a food of love for so many people. I myself love cheese, and having to restrict cheese, well, it just feels like, like you're going to prison, doesn't it? It's just awful.
It is, because when you go to people's house and they get out the cheese and crackers and the dips, it's such a lovely food to have at the center of a gathering. So that was hard, but it's the same as everything. You take your tiny steps and you keep moving forward, and you get to a point where you work out a solution, or a point in time where you can incorporate things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting to hear your own personal experience around finding a diet protocol that works for you, because I do hear from a lot of people that are following a protocol and it's just not working for them. They're still really, quite painful and debilitating symptoms, and perhaps their practitioner has said to them that they recommend they follow a low FODMAP diet, but it's just not right for them. Can you talk to myself and the listeners around whether you noticed a symptomatic change, so that the symptoms you were experiencing once you switched from the biphasic diet to the fast track diet, did things change quite quickly for you?
Not hugely, I don't think. I think I really wanted to change from the biphasic diet because I found it so incredibly restrictive, and I'd seen on the fast track that cheese was included. I was like, all I want to do is eat cheese. Please just let me eat cheese. But what I found was that after going through the biphasic steps, my eczema cleared up and healed. But I have this one finger, my middle finger on my right hand, that is like an indicator now. It's the most bizarre thing, but if I eat something that doesn't agree with my body or my system, that finger gets incredibly itchy and sore. It gets swollen and red, and it still does it. It does it now. So I'll know within half an hour of eating something whether or not it's an issue for me. So my finger tells me. It's really strange, I know, but that's kind of my guideline to keep me on track. And I just take notice and listen to my body and listen to what it's telling me and make adjustments. So I find that even if it's a food that I can eat, the issue for me, I guess, is more that for our family, I love incorporating fresh produce from our garden into our diet, and I use a lot. Like, it's not uncommon to put 7 or 8 vegetables into a single meal. For me, that's the way I cook, and I like my children to get a huge variety of different foods. So for me, I had to completely change my mindset and take those things out. So instead of me having on my plate those 7 or 8 or whatever vegetables, I found that it was just too much for my body. And even if they were considered to be okay to eat from the diet's perspective, in combination it was just too much. So I kind of pulled back to sticking with 3 or 4, and found that helped. So I think it's very much trial and error, and I found that the food diary that you shared with me was really helpful way for me to get a clear view and a clear understanding of how different foods were working for me or not working for me. Because, in the scheme of things, with everything that goes on in your day, your food's a huge part when you have something like SIBO, because it's constantly in your mind. But so all the other things that happen in your day can make you forget that you did in fact have a handful of nuts, as a snack, and then you had something else, and then you had something else. So unless I wrote it down and gave myself a good way to look back and really study and think about the implications of those foods, especially at the start of my process, it's easy to overlook what it is that's causing the problem, or you just think, oh, this is so hard, I don't know what that was. It could have been the carrot, it could have been the radish, it could have been this. But if you've written it down, you can follow your patterns and pretty quickly work it out.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I developed the Food and Mood Diary. And anyone listening to the show can download a copy of that in the show notes. And it's a really great way to see patterns, to see what symptoms are occurring after eating certain foods. And I know that you and I worked together in your early days of having SIBO around looking at those patterns. I think a really great thing that you also, I love the fact that you have a finger that's your indicator. I think it's brilliant. If only we all had a little, one finger that said, hey, I'm not happy. Only us SIBO people understand why that's so wonderful.
It's better than having a bloated belly anyway, so that's...
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. I'd take a finger any day over a bloated belly. But it's really interesting how we become so much more attuned to our bodies. For a period of time, I had a neck. So you had a finger, I had a neck. And if I, as I was reintroducing foods, coming off or going onto a more relaxed version of the biphasic diet, the back of my neck was my indicator for foods that were perhaps just a little bit too much. And I think often it was just the load, so that was how much I was having rather than the food being problematic itself. And I got a bit itchy on the back of my neck, and I'd be like, okay, that food was, well, yeah, I went a bit crazy. I pushed the limits. I pushed the boundaries. I ate way too much than I should have. Next time I'll reduce it, and then I'll reduce the quantity. Then I'd reduce the quantity next time I ate it, and my neck would tell me whether that was suitable or not. But I'm sure there are many people listening that may have something that occurs on their body that is their indicator. And I'd love to hear from the listeners. Send us a message or on any of our social media channels and tell us what you experience as your little indicator, because it'd be really great to see how many necks and fingers and other parts of the body there are. And I wonder if we've got toes or anything else like that. So let's talk about the way you and your food, because one of the things I just loved when I first met you was your whole philosophy around growing produce. And I think it's great. I think one of the things that's the downfall of the Western world these days is we've become really detached from our produce, from growing our own food, and you're really doing something about that. So talk to myself and the listeners around your philosophy, around your business and what you do with your produce.
Okay, so it's my dream really that every Australian family will grow at least one fresh food item at home, and that will allow them to experience the benefits of fresh food. So everything around my business, from my website to the content that I create there, and the free information I provide to people, as well as my products, is all based around helping people to take that step to start their vegetable garden, to get their kids involved in the process, and to start to develop some healthy exposure and understanding of food and how it grows and how you can incorporate it easily into your life. So for us, that started when my children were born, and I've created a vegetable garden in a suburban home that now feeds our family on average about $240 worth of fresh veggies during the summer months, and we collect fresh ingredients every single day for our family meals across the other months of the year. So One of the things that I did when I found out I had SIBO was going through the diet list, was trying to work out, well, okay, what does this mean for our garden and what I grow and what I cook and how I feed my family. So, because all our meals are based on what's seasonally available in the garden, I base my menu around what's ready to harvest, and that's then incorporated into our meals. So that had to change slightly. So I planted a SIBO garden. Well, I called it a SIBO garden because it was winter when I was diagnosed with SIBO. So I created a new section of the garden that was all of the foods that I knew I could eat. So it had bok choy and kale and spring onions and lots of lettuces and things in it. So it was a way for me to get my head into a nice space, because for me the garden is a real place of peace. It helps me relax. It gets me away from my desk and writing and into the fresh air. It's a connection time for our family because the kids being involved in the process means that they're really connected to the food that we eat. So the food that comes inside, they've helped to grow, and our meals are a celebration in one sense, in that, we're saying we're eating the carrots tonight that my little boy grew. So, everyone's excited about what we're doing with those carrots tonight. So, creating that new space in the garden was, I guess, a mental thing for me to start to focus on how I would be changing what it was that was going into our meals slightly.
I think that's just so wonderful, having that celebration of food and celebrating eating the carrots that your son has grown, because it's just, isn't that glorious? What's your advice to anybody that's listening that's saying, well, that's great, you've got a garden, I don't. How do I grow something when perhaps I live in an apartment or I don't have access to a garden space? How can people still get involved in growing something at least?
I found one of the early points in my diagnosis that gave me a great sense of relief, I guess you would call it, and satisfaction, was that herbs and spices could be included in whatever you were cooking. So they create the flavour as well as a huge amount of additional nutrients when they're freshly collected. So herbs are something that you can grow in a pot. You don't need to have a garden. You most definitely don't need a garden space to grow vegetables or herbs. You can use any container that you have on hand. You don't even need to go out and buy something. The school garden, I've seen them plant in a toaster of all things, but an old toaster that didn't work. But you can plant in any sort of pot, put it at the back door, put it on your windowsill, so long as it gets 4 to 6 hours of sunlight and it's in good soil. So you do need to make sure you use a good soil from the nursery. And when I say good soil, I mean one that's been specifically designed for herbs and vegetables. And in Australia, I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but there is a marking on some of those packets that say that it's suited to organic gardening. So they're the ones I look out for. So yeah, you don't need a lot of space to grow. You really can start off small with just one thing, and it's amazing the nutrient as well as the flavour boost that you will get from the simple addition of a handful of herbs to your meal.
Exactly. My partner and I live in an inner city apartment, so we don't have a garden. We've got a balcony and we grow. We've got a big bunch of herbs, which we grow here, and it probably gets just shy of maybe 4 or 5 hours of sunlight a day. So we don't get a huge amount of direct sun on the balcony. But I really love just being able to pop onto the balcony and snip some fresh coriander or cilantro, as it's known in the States, and putting it in my meal, or parsley or anything like that. But something my partner is doing at the moment, which I cannot wait for because it's summertime here in Australia at the moment, is on his office balcony, he has much longer sunlight hours there, and he's growing fresh tomatoes. So we're about to have this abundance of tomatoes, this huge tomato crop, which I'm really excited about. And then something just joyous around seeing something grow that you've grown with your own hands. And I'd like to talk about that with you. You mentioned before taking time out of a busy or stressful day and going and standing outside and reconnecting and looking at what you're growing. I think it's really important, and one of the 5 key pillars to health, which I talk about in episode 1 of the podcast, is about being mindful and also looking at your lifestyle and looking at how you can de-stress and reconnect with your body, reconnect with nature. Because when we're chronically ill and in pain and we're feeling really sick, and we can very, very easily focus on the negative things, the pain, the things we can't do. So I'd love for you to just talk to the listeners around the impact that going out and looking at your SIBO garden, what that had on you psychologically going through this treatment.
Sure. I think for me, one of the big challenges I realised was that my breakfast and my lunch were really quick activities. So I spent a lot of time planning our family evening meals and making sure that as a family I was presenting something at the table that was really healthy and a beautiful way to get together at the end of the day. But my lunch particularly was a complete another story. I would usually eat it really quickly, probably at my computer or at 3 o'clock at the kitchen bench once I realised that, oh my gosh, I have to go get the kids in 15 minutes and I haven't even had lunch yet. So one of the things the garden does for me now is I plan to have lunch, which is a new thing for me, and I don't sit at the computer anymore. I choose a spot to sit, so that's often outside in the garden or at a table outside, but I'll go out to the garden first and I'll collect the ingredients that I'm going to add to my lunch. And I always have lettuce growing in my garden all year round. We're lucky enough in our climate to be able to do that. So usually lettuce is part of my lunch just because I always have it on hand. So I'll go out to the garden and I'll collect what I'm going to be using, and then because I'm doing, that process, I'm thinking about, well, what am I going to make? And I'm not rushing that process anymore. Whereas before I might have grabbed a piece of sourdough and chucked a bit of tomato on, or a piece of ham or a slice of cheese or something. Whereas now I'll make a proper lunch. I'll always make sure our dinner has leftovers that I can eat, and then I can make a salad to accompany it. So the garden is giving me a different process and changing the way my day's structured now, so that it's more focused on that food process and eating, and just sitting and enjoying that 5 minutes and savouring what it is that you're about to eat and thinking about it and being thankful for it because you've watched it grow and I've looked after it and I've watched its progress. I've planted my garden from seed, so it's not a short process. It's something that's taken time and patience and care. So it's a nice process. I was really concerned about time prior to all this happening and focusing on what I could possibly get done in those school hours in this limited time that I had to work. But, I just had to take a step back and realise that it was making me sick, and I was not going to get better unless I started to really slow down, focus on my food and my digestion and let my body do its work rather than continuously just trying to drive forward, I guess, or cram in as much as I possibly could. It wasn't doing me any favours and things had to change. So that's one of the ways I've changed things.
I am just so thrilled to hear you talk about this and talking in a way, because I remember when you first got your diagnosis, and we spent many times chatting about it, and one of the things you used to say is, but I'm too busy. I don't have time to make time for myself for lunch. Rebecca, I've got to eat on the go. I've got so much to do. I can't fit everything into my day when the kids are at school and I've got to be quick. And it's just so interesting for me to hear the journey that you've gone on around realizing that sometimes you just need to slow down and allow your body to heal. And what a great metaphor around that growing your produce takes time and patience, and so does regaining our health.
Yeah, thank you. It has been a challenge to let go of that busy mindset. But I've just had to stand back and say, well, if I have one less blog post up per week, that's something I've imposed on myself, that I think I should have a certain amount of content available for people to have access to, and things that I'm looking to achieve. But realistically, if I don't have my health, I'm not going to achieve anything. And I really can't help anybody, particularly my family, if I'm not well. So it was really important to refocus and let go. Just let go of something.
And I think sometimes as women, we can often be our own worst enemies. We feel the need to often, well, not all women, but we feel the need to be doing everything. And I often say to some of my clients who are mums that if mum in the house isn't well, then how can the house be well? Because we are still such a central point in the running of the house. So I'm just so excited to hear that journey that you've gone on, and kudos to you for making changes that you've needed to make to support your body to be on a path towards health and wellness. So yay for you.
Thank you. I think mentally it's a relief as well when you remove some pressure from yourself and you start to not only feel better in your health, but also better in your well-being and in your mind, and just feeling not so wound up and stressed is, a really good thing for everybody.
It is. One thing I remember we talked about in the early days was around the seasonality of food. And one food that is on the biphasic diet that you eat from the beginning is tomatoes. And I remember having a conversation with you where you were like, no, I don't eat tomatoes in the winter. They're not a winter food. They're a summer food. Mm-hmm. Why is it important for us to be looking at the seasonality of our food and eating food when it's in season rather than food that's been sitting in a deep freeze somewhere or has come from the other side of the world?
Predominantly, for me, it's taste, and it's about having food that doesn't have the food miles and doesn't have all the excess that goes around those food miles, around the storage and the transport. But it's also about the nutritional value of the food, because studies have shown that tomatoes that are harvested green, which is what happens when they have to be transported long distances and they have to have a shelf life in a store before the customer buys it and takes it home and sits it on their own bench for a week, they have to be harvested green. They have 31% less vitamin C than those that are allowed to ripen on the vine. And it's the same with all vegetables and all herbs. So green peas, for example, lose 51% of their ascorbic acid within 48 hours of being harvested. So for me, something's in season when it's in my garden and I've picked it and I eat it straight away. That's when it's at its highest nutritional peak, and it's the most flavoursome at that time. It's supposed to grow then. That's, the conditions around that particular food are right for that food at that time. So that's, I prefer to, everything I try to teach my children is around supporting as well when we can't produce enough of our own food. It's about supporting local producers and local farmers rather than buying something in from another country. I would like to support our own area and our own regions. So that's a really important thing for me morally. I've got strong feelings about that. So when I found out I had SIBO and I could eat tomatoes, I was like, okay, I love tomatoes, that's fantastic, but how? Like I had to actually force myself to eat tomatoes. And I did have to get over that stumbling block, because I thought, well, if I don't eat tomato, that's out of season now. This was in the middle of winter for us. What am I going to eat? All the main foods on the list that were suitable for eating were summer-based foods. So one of the reasons I planted the SIBO garden was obviously to incorporate some of the winter-based foods as well. But I kind of had to give up a little bit on my strong beliefs and say, you know what, you need to eat and just get over it, and you need to get some nutrients into your body, whether they're coming at the right time from the right place. You kind of need to eat, more importantly. So, that's obviously is my preference, to have the food that's fresh out of our garden at the right time in the right season. But you also have to maintain your health and your energy, and it can be tricky especially when you first get started on the SIBO diets, to work out what the heck you're going to eat, especially for some people if it's a extremely radical change from their current diet. So I tried not to put my beliefs ahead of my health.
Yeah, and I think that those early days particularly, but when you're trying to really grasp this new way of eating, I think applying or overlaying seasonality could just almost feel like you can't do it. And I think the first step is eating the foods that are going to help you feel a bit better and help reduce your symptoms, because the diet component really is used for symptom control. And then looking at, like what you did, the foods that perhaps you could grow and you could connect with, and then bringing that into your diet at a later point. It can be so overwhelming in those early days. What has your SIBO diagnosis and subsequent treatment had? What impact has that had on your family and your kids as well? Has it changed the way you do things as a family or look at food, or even the way in particular you've talked a little bit around how you've really worked on making time for yourself? Have there been any other positive impacts with this condition?
The strange thing is that because I was unwell for so many years and nobody could tell me what the problem was, my son in the last year and a half, my eldest son, he's 8, he's been complaining about having a sore stomach on and off. So what I decided to do was to try to investigate, and we have already previously been to the doctors, had numerous tests, and they also all came back as he's fine, he doesn't have any issues or celiac indicators or anything like that, he's okay. So I thought, no, you know what, I'm in my 40s, my son's 8, there is no way on this earth I'm going to make him go on the journey that I've been on and felt so unwell for so many years. So I took him to see the naturopath that I'd started seeing, and he had a blood test to look at his immune response to different foods, and we found out that he's egg, dairy, and all wheats and gluten intolerant. So it was a real relief for me to find out what it was that was causing his discomfort and to be able to immediately rectify it. So I'm mentioning it because it was kind of easier at that point in time to incorporate all our food then under a mix of his requirements and my requirements. So yes, our family diet changed because, we used to eat pasta once a fortnight, and I would make a quiche or frittatas or baking for the kids every day for their school lunches, and that was making my son unwell. So that test and my results have meant that so I'm not making 3 meals, 3 variations of meals for my family every day for every meal. We've all changed the way we eat. So we've pretty much removed most flours and glutens and grains from our overall home. So I went through the pantry and I just took everything out, and I just made these big boxes and sent them off to a friend's house and said, here you go. And it was all beautiful, organic, high quality flowers and grains and lentils and gorgeous things. And I was just like, nah, we're not having these in our house anymore. We don't need to use them. So they all went out the door. So for us, things have been simplified. If you want to cut it down to the basics, we've gone back to just very plain, simple foods that are based around the vegetables or ingredients that are available from the garden at the moment, and usually a protein or a fish. We don't tend to have so many vegetarian meals now because of our inability to have the egg for my son, and also for me because I also have an issue with egg. So yeah, it has changed, but everybody's come on board because I don't have time to make 3 meals a day for everybody.
Fair enough. And what's been the reaction with your kids? How have they? What have they thought about this change to the way that the whole house is eating?
My eldest son, who was diagnosed with the intolerances, he's been really amazing. He's just quickly adapted and he's completely unfazed by it because he feels better. He has no more pains in the stomach. He doesn't come home looking washed out at the end of the day after school because he's been concentrating so hard on trying to hear the teacher but not be distracted by his stomach pains. So, for him, it's fantastic, and he's had the opportunity to test all these new treats, and I've let him, in the past I would have said, don't waste that food. Even if the kids didn't like it, I was more inclined to say, no, eat it, it's good food, and that's what I've got for you to eat. We went through this whole process with him where he was allowed to just try all these new things and see if he liked them, and if he didn't like them, he didn't have to eat them, and we wouldn't use that as a substitute snack or whatever it was we were trying to work out at the time. So, he found it quite exciting, I think. The rest of the family, my husband's actually been surprisingly good with it. I thought that he would struggle with it more, but he's saying that he actually feels much better with the change in the slight modifications in the diet as well. Sometimes I'll have eggs in the fridge so he can have egg on toast or whatever in the morning if he feels like it, but the rest of the family kind of has their own thing. So yeah, I think it's been a positive thing for everybody. And my little boy, we haven't bothered testing, but he's never wanted to eat egg. He's always refused to eat egg, so I'm assuming that he also has the same intolerance to egg, but he was always been clever enough to know that and always refused it. So he just doesn't get them now either. So they're just, some things just smooth out in the wash, I guess.
How interesting. What a positive impact this has had on the whole family. And it's not just yourself who's feeling better, but your son is feeling better as well. And that just, to me, makes me so happy. And I think that if we can get our young people, our kids and our younger adults getting well quicker, then they're not likely to end up like us older people who have been chronically unwell for a long time. And it can take us some time to get over SIBO and other conditions that we have. In terms of knowing when the right season is for food, how can people find out when food is in season and when they should be eating it?
In terms of growing it, on my website, you can find a free seasonal planting guide. So it's divided up by season. It tells you what you can plant for each season. So you can find that out of freshlegacy.net under the menu item Helpful Resources. And then on the homepage, there's also a number of posts that talk to you about getting your garden started. So for me, I know something's in season because it's ready to harvest in my garden. That's my primary indicator. You can tell by what's in season in the stores. In Australia, stores need to label whether an ingredient has come from overseas or not, as in a fresh food produce item. There's also a number of websites that are farmers market based that you can type in seasonal. If you Google seasonal food Melbourne, for example, that will bring up a list of the fruits and vegetables that are in season for the current period. And you can change that away from Melbourne to other areas if you're not in Melbourne, obviously.
And I've got those links in the show notes. And I believe that we've got the seasonal guide that we can link to all listeners. It's based on the Australian season. So if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, I don't know, does your seasonal guide list by month?
No, it doesn't. It's just by season. So it just says, yeah.
Oh, okay. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world because we have a lot of listeners in the Northern Hemisphere. Then you can just use based on your seasons. And if people want to connect with you, you have given them your website. But how else can people connect with you?
So you can find me on all social media as A Fresh Legacy. So Facebook, Instagram is where I mostly hang out. Probably Instagram is my favourite piece, but otherwise my email details you can find also via freshlegacy.net.
Wonderful. And if anybody wants to see the beautiful produce coming out of your gardens, then Instagram is the place to go. I'm often looking at your Instagram feed thinking that it looks so lovely and I just need some space so I can grow a few more things.
Oh, you're doing well if you've got your balcony going. That's a great start.
I can't claim too much credit. It really is my partner doing that. He's much more of a green thumb than I am, but we have a little worm farm which takes all of our green waste and our vegetable waste, and we've got our little herbs. So we're doing what we can in a very small balcony space.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the Healthy Gut podcast today and talking about your own personal journey with gut health and SIBO. And I think it's just great to hear a story of turning a condition like SIBO into a positive, growing your own food, reconnecting with making some time for yourself. And I just thoroughly love the concept of celebrating food that you and your kids are growing and having that family time on a Sunday afternoon to sit down and just reconnect with each other. And you know what? I'm going to go and implement that myself. I think that is just such a great thing to do. So turn off the devices, turn off the laptop and the iPad and sit down and actually have a conversation. Thanks so much for sharing and coming on the show.
Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Kyrstie Barcak. If you would like to get a full transcription of today's episode or the show notes or any of the links that we mentioned on the episode, you can head to thehealthygut.co/grow. There you'll find a link to the SIBO quiz that will give you an indication of the likelihood that you have SIBO, also information on the biphasic diet, the fast track diet. Also, you can download our free food and mood diary and also a seasonal guide for fruits and vegetables. And here's the exciting part that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. We also have some really fun specials coming out this month because it's my birthday at the end of the month and I love celebrating it. So I want to share the love, share it with you guys, my gorgeous podcast listeners. All you need to do is head to our Facebook page where every single week we're going to be releasing some new specials or promotions just for our customers. So head over there to the Healthy Gut Facebook page, which is facebook.com/thehealthyguts with an S on the end. The other exciting news I have for you is I am just about to be launching a brand new SIBO coaching program. When I went through my SIBO journey, I realised that, there was so much more I needed to do around getting well that was in addition to taking the medication that I took to kill off the bacteria. And so I'm now really excited to be able to offer a program for those of you with SIBO who are looking for some extra support. I know exactly what it feels like to be chronically unwell. I was sick for 36 years and today I feel amazing and I'm looking forward to working with people just like you to help get you there. Now, if you are interested in learning more, there's a no obligation sign up so that you can tell me you would like to hear more about this program. simply head to thehealthygut.co/interest. And you can say to me, Rebecca, I'm interested. Tell me more. There's no obligation to sign up for a program. It's just that I will tell you a little bit more about it. And for those of you who are those early birds, the ones that sign up early and first, then there will be some extra special gifts for you guys to say thank you for being part of the community of people who sign up first. So head to thehealthygut.co/interest. Now, I love hearing your feedback, so don't forget to write a rating and review in iTunes or the app that you use to listen to this podcast. And you can connect with us on all our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Pinterest, and Google+. Just look for us under The Healthy Gut. Coming up on next week's show, we have an absolute cracker. I am interviewing Dr. Norm Robillard, who is the creator of the fast-tracked diet, a diet that is used quite commonly for treatment with SIBO. Dr. Robillard shares with me his own personal journey around his own digestive issues and how he developed the diet, why he developed the diet, and how it can be used. Plus, we get to answer a whole bunch of questions that my listeners asked me to ask Dr. Robillard before the episode aired. So I look forward to sharing that with you next week. You've been listening to the Healthy Gut podcast with your host, Rebecca Coombs. To learn more about the Healthy Gut or our podcast, head to thehealthygut.co/podcast. And as we are fully funding this podcast, if you would like to help support the continuation of this podcast so that we can continue to bring you future episodes, all you need to do is make a contribution at thehealthygut.co/podcast. We would like to thank Belinda Coombs for the production, editing, and original music score of this podcast. To hear more of Belinda's music, head to soundcloud.com/Belinda Coombs. The Healthy Gut podcast is a production of The Healthy Gut. Thanks for listening.